everyone, welcome to GetREAL. GetREAL is an opportunity for high school students to explore university and career options with our own ISKL alumni working or studying around the world. It's an opportunity to learn more about university and work life, as well as ask important questions in a small group setting. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Marley Emmerich, a 2015 graduate of ISKL. Marley's global upbringing has shaped her career in film development, and she's here to share insights into her journey from ISKL to working in the film industry. We're excited to hear her story and learn from her experiences. Okay, Marley, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. When I was at ISKL, I didn't have, there was no film classes. So I'm really jealous that you guys even have that opportunity. It's really awesome. I think I'll just go into a little spiel about myself and then I'll get into my little presentation. At any point, if you guys have any questions, just let me know and we can do them throughout the presentation or after, whatever you prefer. But I, like you guys, went to ISKL, but I was a third culture kid, that term, but I was a third culture kid my whole life. My mom actually still works at ISKL. So I was born in the US, but traveled my whole life. Literally never lived there. Went all over the world, finished at ISKL, and then I realized I wanted to do film or do something with film the summer before my senior year in high school because I did sort of like a film summer program at the New York Film Academy, and I was like, I want to do this, and I'm really lucky that my mom was really supportive. I know that some parents, the idea of working a career in film or in the arts is a bit terrifying for parents, but my mom was really supportive, and I decided I wanted to study film, so my options were going to be somewhere in LA, somewhere maybe in New York. I wasn't keen on going to school there for a lot of reasons, but one being, schools in the States can be expensive, but I had a really great opportunity to go to school in Canada, at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, which has a huge film community there. I went to school there and I studied film studies, which I'll get into a little bit. It really, really helped my career. And I studied film there, did a 4-year degree there. And then right after that, I graduated just before the pandemic in 2019. So I had a few months of freedom in real life before, all of that hit. But in that time, I worked at a talent agency and I worked there as an intern and then eventually was the office admin and then eventually became the assistant to the head literary agent at that company. And I'll get more into literary agencies as a great avenue to enter a film career shortly, but that's kind of where I took off, worked there for about 2 years, and then decided I wanted to do something different. And if I wanted to do more with my career, I had to leave Canada. And so I moved to London kind of on a whim, made it work, and eventually got a career in development there. And now I work for the fantastic Alfonso Cuarón as his development executive. And yeah, I'm going to get into a little bit of what that looks like, what a career as a dev exec looks like, because I think most people, when they think they want to do a career in film, they think, okay, I want to be a director or screenwriter, unless you have really specific ambitions to be like an editor or a cinematographer. But there's a whole other world of different opportunities in film behind the scenes that I think people don't even realize are opportunities. So I'd love to go into that with you guys and take any questions you have. So yeah, let's get started with the presentation. So like I said, I went to film school. You're going to hear a lot. If you decide you want to pursue a career in film, you'll hear a lot about whether or not it's worth it to go to film school. Quentin Tarantino very famously said that it's a waste of time. And he didn't go, and a lot of the greatest directors you see never went to film school, and you don't need to do it. It's honestly, it's really what you make of it. For example, if you wanted to be a director or work as a cinematographer, an editor, even a screenwriter, I do think that going to film school would give you a lot of valuable skills. I mean, obviously you would leave film school with short films a set experience that you wouldn't have otherwise that you can use down the line. But a career in this industry is all about who you know and meeting people. And going to film school, you will meet an unbelievable amount of people, whether it's future creatives like yourself that you meet as classmates, to professors, industry professionals. There's networking events. Like that is what you really get out of film school, other than, of course, skills. But these are still skills that you could learn in real time on set if you decided you wanted to go and be a production assistant and try and learn this stuff without getting the education for it. Honestly, you can definitely have a career in film, a successful one, without going to film school. But I think you meet a lot of people and you get a lot of invaluable skills. But that doesn't mean you can't study something else and then still also do film if that is the career path that you want to go down. And then film studies, which is what I studied. I think a lot of people, including myself, didn't realize that this was an option when I decided to pursue film. I wasn't particularly keen in being a director when I did my summer program the summer before my senior year. We did directing and camera work, and I thought it was fun, but it just wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, and I couldn't pinpoint why or what it was I wanted to do. And then when I found out my university offered a film studies program instead of just production, I got really excited, because then I realized that's what I was really interested in, which is film studies is like an English degree, but with films, which obviously my mother was like, what am I paying for when I went to university? But it actually was a very valuable degree. And with film studies, it's really a focus on film theory, history, criticism. You read a lot. You read a lot of books, papers. You watch a lot, and it is invaluable for a career in development. And I'll get into the nitty gritty of what a development executive does and why film studies is so valuable to it in a little bit. But even if you're studying to be a director or cinematographer and editor, a film studies class is invaluable, whether it's history of film or, I think you guys are going to be doing a little bit of film studies and theory as you go into German Expressionism and French New Wave. This is the kind of stuff you would study pretty much exclusively in a film studies degree. And if you ever want to work behind the scenes, honestly, there's no better career path, or sorry, university path to take for that. I think you can go down to the next slide, please. So, like I said, there's also so many other degree options you can look at if you want to do film. I think like there are a lot of parents who are scared of film degrees because they think, well, it's so specific and it's a really competitive industry, and I'm scared that my kid is not going to get a job. And working in film it's definitely unconventional compared to like if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. It's not like you go to school, maybe you get your master's, then you maybe do an internship or something that's set up for you like pretty much easily right away, and then you go and you get your job, and like that's the end of it. You do have to hustle, you do have to network, you do have to use your connections and kind of try a bunch of things out. But if you really want to study film, but your parents are terrified for you and they don't want you to just study film production or film studies, you can do other things as well that will still help you in the industry. You can get a business degree and work in entertainment law. Or one of my closest friends and former roommate who also went to UBC with me and did the same program, she also got a business degree on top of her film studies degree, and now she works as a producer, and it became a really valuable part of the degree. Was really helpful for her because it taught her a lot about business affairs that you use every single day in film, depending on what it is you want to do. Journalism is a great degree if you want to work in documentary. A literature degree is fantastic if you ever want to work in film development. It gives you the same skills kind of that film studies does, except obviously you're just studying books. But if you're ever wanting to be a writer or if you want to work in development, a literature degree is very valuable. Alfonso, when he hired me, he was definitely disappointed that I didn't have a literature degree, because he usually only hires development executives with literature degrees. But I fought and I said, film study, because he's definitely in the camp of, I mean, he went to film school, but he really loved hiring development executives with literature degrees. I think he thought they brought a different perspective to it, but it worked out for me in the end. Marketing and PR, there's a whole other industry there. If that's something you're interested in, there's other degrees you can do there that can help you get into the industry. And then, of course, VFX and digital media, which I don't know a lot about, but there are whole other degrees that you can do there that also correlate with other stuff you can do in school, computer science and all sorts of other things like that. So, you know, if you're ever in the boat where you need to convince your parents to let you study film, you can also do these things adjacently, or maybe one of them is a minor and film is a major, or vice versa. That can help you convince your parents. I know that some of my friends had to do that. Like my friend who got her business degree, she was able to convince her parents to let her do film because of the BA degree. They thought that was like a good safety net, and it really worked out for her. You don't necessarily have to do this stuff to succeed, like I said, but it's kind of a numbers game with your parents, right? Next slide, please. Now, where you go to school is very, very important. Where you decide to settle when it comes to your career is very, very important. I don't know where all of you guys are from. Obviously, every country has their own sort of global cinema. They have their own local, you know, they have their whole thing going. I mean, Malaysia has a huge film industry, right? Obviously, it's very localized, but it's a very big industry. So where you go just obviously is really important. But if you want to, you know, work in Hollywood or whatever, or something like that, obviously LA and New York City are your best places to go. But, you know, LA has been the center of the film world for a really, really long time, but especially since the pandemic, this has really started to shift. I think there's a lot more going on in a lot of other places. So it's another great it's good news if you don't want to go to school in the States or can't go to school in the States, that it does not limit you to not being able to have a career in film. Like I went to school in Canada. I spent 7 years there, even as an American. I spent 7 years there before I decided to leave. And I still have never lived in the US since I was a kid. I never have done any film work there, and I'm doing fine. So, you know, if you don't want to go to LA and New York City, you have a lot of options. But Canada, um, Canada is what we call a service industry. So not a lot of stuff other than like, you know, Schitt's Creek, a few random shows that have come out of Canada in the past few years. Not a lot is made there organically, you know, not a lot is made there, written there, directed there, and set off there. Usually people will come and bring their shows and movies to be filmed there because it has this amazing versatile landscape. It's really close to the US. It has really, really good tax incentives so that, you know, productions can get a lot of money off to film or to do their post-production there. So it's quite limited in that sense. That's the reason I left Canada, because if I wanted to have a degree, or sorry, if I wanted to have a career where I could be creative and flourish, it's not necessarily the best place right now, but it's a really good place to start. And I will stand by that. So if you're looking at school in Canada or you're Canadian and you know you want to settle there in your career for a little bit, it's still a very good place to start, and it is growing a lot and changing a lot. So in the next 10 years, like who knows what it could look like. It could take over in terms of being one of the centers of the film world. It's definitely a huge bustling industry there, but like I said, right now it's more of a service industry. Like most of the shows you watch on TV, like humongous chunk of them are filmed in Canada, specifically in British Columbia, like The Last of Us and all sorts of other shows. That's just the first one that came to mind, but tons filmed there. So if you love set work too, and you're Canadian or you go to school there, it's another great place to be. And then London, where I live, is sort of like the LA of Europe. Tons of stuff being produced and filmed here, lots of opportunity. Obviously, a lot of the content kind of skews towards being quite British or European, but that is also changing since the pandemic. Things are blowing up internationally. Honestly, it's a fantastic city, and a great place to work for film, because when you move to LA, you are a little fish in a very big pond. And obviously, that doesn't mean you won't succeed, but it is tougher. It's a tough world. But in London, you're definitely in a smaller pond. So it's a little bit easier in terms of opportunities, or there's just more out there. But obviously not everybody can move to the UK. If you can, I mean, I love it. I recommend it. It's great. And then, there's a whole litany of other industries out there, Australia, India, like, and then some. So it really depends on where you go and what you want to do, but there's always opportunities out there. Um, Next slide, please. So when I moved to Vancouver, like I said, I started working in a literary agency. And unless you guys want to be a really hands-on director, cinematographer, editor, or if you're unsure, or if you're a screenwriter, literary agencies are a really, 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 really good place to start to start your film career. Actually, most people, if you move to LA, for example, or even London, most people you meet who are studio executives, who are executive producers, creatives, like a crazy amount of them started off as an assistant at a literary agency. It is kind of like where most people start. So that's working at Creative Artists, so CAA, WME, United Agents, UTA. There's so many different talent agencies, and most people will start off there. They have a really crazy system in LA where you come in and you'll be somebody's assistant for 6 months, and then they'll move you to somebody else. And you'll keep doing that for 2 years. It's a 2-year program. And after 2 years, they tell you, go, be on your way. You've learned everything, you've met everyone, you've done what you needed to do. Unless that is, of course, your desire is to be a career assistant. Like if you're Ari Emanuel, one of the biggest agents in Hollywood, you're going to have the same assistant. You're not going to be okay with having one come in and out every 6 months. But for the most part, your everyday agent will cycle through assistants like crazy so that you can learn as much as you can and then get out. And so that's what they do. So, or you stay within the agency if you want to be an agent and go through a different program after being an assistant and be a junior agent and kind of move up. Being an agent, that's a whole other career path if that's something you want to do. I decided it wasn't for me when I was at the literary agency. So I did my 2 years and said, I learned what I needed to do and I'm going to move on. But it's a fantastic place to start because you get a whole purview of the entire film world in those 2 years. You look at how everything works, and they work across everything: film, television, publishing, theater. You can watch how everybody interacts and how everything works. On the business side, you can look at how contracts are done, negotiations, property rights, deal making. And then agencies also, they scout and they manage and represent all of the screenwriters, actors, directors, all your favorite people. And you often get to look at their materials before other people do, or give feedback. If you're a really trusted assistant or a trusted junior agent, you get to give a lot of feedback on stuff. You can go with the next slide, please. So yeah, working in a talent agency is a great place to start. It's a high stress environment, but it kind of sets you up for everything else in the industry. And it would be a fantastic place to start. So that's something I really highly recommend to people. Especially if you're unsure about what it is you want to do, maybe you want to work behind the scenes, you want to work as a creative executive or a studio exec or something like that, but you don't know where to start, that is a good place to go. And then now development, which is what I do. So a development executive, I'm responsible for reading. Basically, most of my job is reading. And I read scripts, I read books, I read pitches, I read a litany of everything, whether it's submitted to me by an agent at an agency who at some point I've made a connection with because of my time at a literary agency, or a producer, a writer that I know, a director. It can be any host of people who will submit stuff to our company. So I work for a talent-based company. So that's a company run by Alfonso Cuaron. So some companies, like if you worked at Universal Studios or Warner Brothers, those aren't talent-based companies. That's just a studio. So they also have in-house development executives there, and this is their job, same thing. But as a talent-based company, like because Alfonso runs my company, we also get a lot of stuff submitted for his consideration to direct, right? Specifically. And so on top of looking at stuff that we want to make freshly, originally our own, I'm also looking at stuff that he is being asked to direct, and I'll read it and I'll say, Alfonso, I think you should take a look at this. Or without even, you get to a point where you read it and you don't even have to run it by him. You just go, I know he's not going to like this. I know he won't want to do this. So my day-to-day involves, reading scripts and books and plays and articles and identifying sort of their potential for film and TV adaptation. TV is obviously the big hot thing right now, so we're trying to do as much television as possible, but it's tough to get things through streamers right now. Everyone's very picky, which I guess is a good thing, but that's what we're working on right now. I meet with a lot of writers and directors and agents to hear their pitches and consider new projects. I track a lot of industry trends to kind of see what's hot, what people want to watch. And I mean, if you pay careful attention, you'll see most of television comes out in clusters. You'll get a lot of stuff that's really very similar coming out in little batches because everybody talks in the industry. It's quite a small industry when you think about it. And all of the same producers, directors, and people are getting pitched everything at the same time, and everything that works usually aligns. Everybody feels the same way about everything, and suddenly you'll see a lot of projects that are really, really similar. Like for a long time, like after The White Lotus, there was a lot of rich people on an island, rich people stuck doing this kind of stories, and they became really, really hot, and then they kind of fade away, and then something else takes its place. So you'll see that a lot when you work in development. I also give a lot of script notes and feedback to projects. So let's say I've read a book, I love it. I talk to my company, I say, I think we should option it. So that means we should put down a offer to buy the rights to the book for like 2 years, typically. It can go anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, is the typical amount of time that you kind of option a book for. And within those 2 years, we can do whatever we want to try and get it made. We can find our own writer, we can find our own director, we can take it to all the streamers or all the studios and see if anybody wants to make it made. And then within that 2 year period, if somebody does officially request to make it and they greenlight it, then we continue to own the rights to the book, or the script or the play or whatever it is that we're optioning. And then we roll with it. So when we take this optioned book or play or whatever, and we have a writer or a writer's room work on it, then the development executives, we are the ones who give the notes on the script, and we help kind of shape it into being something that our company wants and something that we can sell to the studio. Sometimes we'll liaise, like we're the middleman between the big studio person and the writer to help kind of get the script to where the studio is happy, right? So it depends on what stage the project's in, what kind of notes we give. And we usually like pair writers and directors together as well. Like I'm trying to do that right now with a show that we have a wonderful, wonderful writer for. And we already have an actor attached who wants to do the show, but now we have to find a director. And once we have that trifecta settled, then we can take it back to the studio and say, look, we're ready to go. And hopefully that will get us a green light. And then, we package and pitch projects, like I just said. We work with agents and producers as well to do this packaging. And we also often will prepare pitch materials, lookbooks and treatments. So those would be, let's say I have my pilot episode for my television show. But I don't think that the pilot alone will be enough to get a studio to go, I'm ready to do this show. They need to see the whole vision. Well, then I'll make my pitch deck. I'll make my lookbook, which will be anywhere from 5 to 10 to 20 pages that outlines my whole series. And you can do this also for a film. You can write an entire script for a film, but then also accompany it with a pitch deck that has photos from other films and colors and moods that kind of give off the vibe that you're trying to go for with that film. So the studio can kind of understand what your vision is. And on top of that, you can kind of explain your intentions. Or if there's franchise potential with this film, you can be like, this is where I see it going in the future. So it's sort of supplementary material that you can provide that you as a development executive can make, or sometimes will be submitted to you by a writer when they send you their pilot or their feature. They'll also send a lookbook, and you can use that as well. My favorite, because I do a lot of reading, like a mountain of reading every single day. I do love when I just receive a pitch deck sometimes. No pilot, no feature. I can just judge everything off the pitch deck. But obviously, you can make a pretty crappy pitch deck, but make a fantastic pilot, so really the writing is more important. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit of the day to day. There is some more though. If we go to the next slide, please. There's also a lot of day to day stuff working with producers, financiers, and studio executives. This is another reason why starting at the literary agencies is so important if you want to work in development, because you'll already know that a lot of these people. You don't have to make introductions. You don't have to pitch yourself to them every single time on top of pitching these projects. These are just people that you can text or reach out to and say, hey, I've got something for you. What do you think? Let me test the waters right now in 5 minutes instead of setting up a whole pitch session and seeing if you'd be interested. I can just message you or we can have this kind of relationship. And a really fun part of my job is getting to attend film festivals. And so obviously if attending film festivals is something you want to do, well, I mean, just as an everyday person, most people can attend a film festival. And I'm sure maybe some of you guys, maybe you have before, you can buy tickets and go see movies. TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, one of the best, one of the biggest, is I think the best one for everyday people to just go and watch films. It's the most accessible. It can be pricey, but if you save up and you can buy some tickets to your favorite films, it is one of the best ones to go to. Because the Cannes Film Festival and the Venice Film Festival are a bit harder to get tickets to, and obviously they're much more expensive locations. But any sort of local film festival that you might have in your hometown or even in KL or anywhere you can go, I recommend dropping in as much as you can, seeing what's out there, seeing what people are working on. If you want to be a director, you want to be a writer or work on set, at some point your film is going to have to go through the film circuit, the festival circuit. You'll get used to it. It'll be a whole world that you immerse yourself into. On the development side, I think we have the most fun version of film festivals because we just go and watch the movies and see what's out there, because we're not trying to buy the film. We're not trying to sell our own film. We're just watching, just getting a sense of what people are into and stuff. So that is a really fun part of my job that I really, really love. And it helps us keep up with what studios and streamers and distributors are looking for. And then on top of everything I spoke about before, then on an admin side, day to day, I manage the development slate with my coworker. She's the other development executive at our company. And so we will have, I think we have 20 projects on our slate is what it's called, which is just, our slate is really just what my company has working on in development. And everything's at different stages. We have 3 projects that I think are like really close to getting greenlit. Then we have some projects that are just kind of existing in the ether with like great scripts or great writers attached that we're just trying to find a home for. And then we have at the very bottom of our slate, like just concepts, ideas that we're working on trying to flesh out. So there's about, 20 to 30 of those projects just kind of on our slate in different various stages. And so, we have to keep up with all of them, work all of them. That's kind of where my day-to-day comes from. And there's deadlines and drafts and budgets and all this kind of stuff that we have to keep up with as well. So there is this whole not very fun admin element to it, but that definitely keeps me busy every day. And then can you go to the next slide? That might be it. Very unceremonious if that's not. Oh yeah, no. Producing, right. So if you want to be a producer, working in development is a very good place to start, because you'll see a lot of directors and screenwriters who will eventually get producer credits on the films they work on. But if you want to be like a career producer, which is my not so secret ambition that I'm trying to head towards with my development executive career, this is a really good place to start. And there's lots of different types of producers. And I know that you guys, maybe, I'm not sure if you've spoken about it in class, or, you'll watch your credits at the end of a film and you'll see there's sometimes like 100,000 producers or 20 executive producers, or sometimes a film only has like 3. And so it's kind of confusing, like, what does each producer do? Why is this important? And so I thought I'd go over producing a little bit as well as a potential career track. If this is something you want to do one day in the industry, then career in development is really helpful, or working at an agency, getting to know those kind of people, being an agent. There's a lot of agents who are producers for their clients. There's a lot of tracks into this, but it depends on what it is you want to do. So on a project, there are obviously lead producers. So when you get your produced by credit, that can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes it's just a credit in name. Sometimes you have been really helpful to the production for whatever reason, and the director or the studio would like to sort of honor that by saying you are a producer. Usually when that happens, you'll get an associate producer credit, or it really just depends on the project. You could get an executive producer credit and have done pretty much nothing on the film. It really depends on who's giving you this credit. But if you were to be a cold hard real producer, you kind of do very similar stuff to development, where you find and develop projects, acquire rights, but then you step up a level by securing financing from studios and streamers, and applying for grants from local government, which, for example, Canada has a lot of those for local film. They'll give you a lot of money if you're making like a local Canadian film with Canadian talent, because they want to sort of encourage it. And then as a producer, you help put together sort of the key creative team on a film. So you are usually the person where you go, okay, like, all right, I've been working with Marley. She's my development executive. We have this great script. Now it's my job as the producer to go out with her, figure out who the director and writer is. Okay, we've done that. And then as a development executive, that's kind of where my job stops. Like, of course, I can give my opinion on cast and crew, but it's really then the producer who goes, all right, we're hiring this person, this person, this person to be our lead actor. And then they kind of just overall oversee the production. But obviously I'll get into the nitty gritty in a minute of like what each specific producer does, because not every just overall producer oversees the whole production and has this much say. It just depends on production to production. And then obviously you'll see the executive producer, which seems like the most elite, highest title you can get as a producer on the film. Often, like, for example, when a film wins Best Picture at the Oscars, it's the executive producers who are listed as the recipients, and they are the ones who accept the Oscar on behalf of the film for Best Picture. But not every executive producer actually, was that instrumental in the film. For example, if you worked at Warner Brothers or Universal Studios or any of these big studios, you'll usually have the head of the studio or the executive who like was sort of in charge of the project on behalf of Universal or whatever. They'll be credited as the EP, as the executive producer. Maybe they actually didn't do that much at all, or maybe they were a hugely instrumental part, right? It really just depends on production to production. But usually the EP is responsible for securing funding and like the major talent and distribution. Sometimes they're just the high profile name attached to kind of get the film sold, like produced by EP'd by Steven Spielberg, but Steven Spielberg actually didn't do anything. He just like came to set once and like read the script and said he liked it. It really just depends. And yeah, you can have an EP in-house, in residence at a studio, a streamer, a network. They're everywhere. And this is my ultimate goal, but it takes a while to get there. Next slide, please. And then there's more production focused producers. A line producer is the unsung hero of a film set. Sometimes they're called the unit production manager. That is like the actual producing job. I would consider it one of the most thankless jobs in the film industry, along with first assistant directors, first ADs. A director obviously works very hard, and a producer most of the time works very hard. But the people doing the serious work are the line producers and the first ADs when it comes to actual set work. And so your line producer, if I have a film, I've secured the budget, I've done all this kind of stuff, I'm ready to go, then I take everything and I give it to my line producer and I hire them. And they actually put the film together. They actually make a budget and decide where that money goes and how it goes around the set. They make the entire schedule. They'll sit on hours and hours of meetings with every head of department in the film. Just sit there and go, how are we going to film this? How are we going to split up the script? And how are we going to film these scenes? And how are we going to make this work with the budget? they will hire all the other crew, like your gaffers, your construction workers on set, like all of those people, like they will hire them. Um, they will they will work with the locations team to find the places to film everything. Like obviously the director's involved in all this, but the director kind of comes along for the ride. The line producer really is spearheading this movement. So it's a crazy hard job, but it is like the most invaluable job on set, I would say. Um, and line producers will often be rewarded with, you know, recognition. Like for example, on the show that I did for Apple with Alfonso called Disclaimer, our line producer Donald, who's fantastic, and he works with amazing people. He was our line producer for the whole shoot, which lasted like 265 days, which is an insane amount of time to film a TV show. And he was an executive producer then at the end. So he was a line producer, and then he also got the executive producer credit. And oftentimes that will come with like a bonus, a pay bump or something, or royalties down the line. So there are a lot of incentives to want that credit. But sometimes it's just the name. It depends on, what the studio decides to give you. Then there's associate producer, which is kind of like that credit that someone will give you when they're gonna throw you a bone. Like, hey, Marley, you did so much work on this project. Like, I'm just gonna give you this recognition by giving you an associate producer credit, So it's usually often given as like a thank you for like you've done some specific element that we appreciate. But it's a great way to start building up your credibility so that you can work as a producer down the line. So if somebody offers it to you, take it, obviously. And then there's development and creative producers, which is kind of where I'm trying to head. And, like I said, a lot of producers have a lot of roles on set that involve crewing and budgeting and financing. And that is not something I'm necessarily me personally interested in. I'm more interested in being like a creative producer and help sort of structuring the vision of the film. Creative producers aren't often just credited as a creative producer, if ever. So you usually just get a producer credit. But in that sense, though, my ambition is to be a creative producer on set and to sort of stay with the project all the way through post-production to ensure the film's vision is realized. A lot of producers, this is what they do, but you're never credited as a creative producer. It's what you do, and then you're just credited as a producer. And then co-producer, that's another sort of very similar to associate producer credit, where you're usually involved in like a specific part. So associate producer and co-producers are kind of like credits that they give you to throw you a bone down the line. But it's usually because you've done a specific thing on the film, whether you've worked in VFX or music or done something really valuable, you worked really hard, and then this is what they give you. But most people are quite stingy with giving these credits out because, sometimes they do come with sort of a monetary bonus of some kind. So they can be kind of stingy. Next slide, please. And that's kind of it, guys. Sorry, I just realized I like word vomited so much information at you. So of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away. I know that when I decided I wanted to work in film, I kind of thought I knew what I was doing and I thought I knew what I wanted to do, but then I realized it was a whole other world. So please feel free to ask away if you have any questions. Hi.
Hi. My question is, if you could go back to your student years, like high school, what would you do to prepare if you knew that you were going into a career in film?
I definitely would get used to it. I guess it depends on what you want to do in film, but I think if I could go back, I would definitely get used to talking to people a lot more, networking with people a lot more, putting myself out there more. That is a huge part of being successful in the industry, is being able to put yourself out there, meet people. I think that's a really big thing you need to do. And also watching as much as you can. And obviously that sounds like a fun little piece of homework to do, but it is true. I can't even begin to express how important it is to watch everything. And especially if you aren't going to study film after you graduate high school, if you're not going to study film, or you're going to go straight into set work or trying to go straight into everything like that, then watch everything that you can when you have free time, ranging from stuff that normally maybe you would not want to watch. Like, I mean, look, you guys are going to start studying German Expressionism and stuff soon, I believe. Obviously, I would never personally want to go watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from like the 1920s, just like for fun on a weekend. But like, it's important if you're ever going to be a filmmaker to watch everything that you can as far back as you can, to see how cinema has changed and to see the way everything works. And when I graduated high school, I had watched a ton of TV, but my film history knowledge was abysmal. And I had a lot of learning to do and a lot of catching up to do when I studied film. And that's obviously what my degree was for. But if you're not going to study it and your film history knowledge is not great, I definitely recommend watching as much as you can and getting used to talking to people, selling yourself. Like, that's really, really important down the line.
Hi, I have questions. The first is, what aspects of filmmaking do you think are like currently being threatened by like artificial intelligence? And then also when you were working as a at a literary agency, like was there like a specific degree that you were hired because of, or is like what was the experience of getting hired for that job?
Yes, great questions. The first one, AI is threatening so much in my industry and a lot of industries right now. There is a bit of fear mongering that like AI could write a script or whatever. I'm not worried about that at all, because if any of you have used ChatGPT or anything of the likes, like, you know that like it's not gonna write a script. Actually, to be fair, some of the stuff you watch on Netflix, sometimes these movies, you could be like, AI could have written that as a joke, but like I'm not too worried about yeah, there's some movies out there that I'm like, did AI write this? I'm not too worried about AI taking over screenwriting, because I do feel like the community is strong enough and vocal enough that they won't allow that to happen. But unfortunately, I was talking about pitch decks earlier. There's an entire subset of graphic designers whose entire job is to make professional pitch decks for studios and streamers and for writers. It's a job that you used to be able to outsource and hire somebody to help you make a pitch deck that's beautiful and professional, that you can present to somebody really high up. And you'll see them now, you can spot them a mile away. They drive me crazy when I get them, the AI pitch decks. They're all the people don't really have faces and everything looks really weird and shiny, and it's like really, really easy to spot them. And a lot of graphic designers and a lot of development people whose whole job is to just make pitch decks and even do the design aspects of it, like that's not a part of their job anymore. And it is kind of sad to see. And then on the visual effects side, I think a lot of visual effects people have been, at first, were quite happy to have AI kind of supplement their career. It was kind of like a helpful tool, but you'll see now a lot of the biggest visual effects and special effects houses, sorry, just visual effects houses, are hemorrhaging money and shutting down. Technicolor, who they've been in the industry since the beginning. There was just an article yesterday in the trades about how they're going out of business and they're trying to sell to somebody else. And visual effects is being really, really heavily impacted by AI, because if you can have a computer do it for you and you don't have to pay people, of course, a lot of the studios are going to be really into it. I don't think we're at the place, at least not in, I don't know, I don't want to say not in my lifetime, because it's grown so much already, which is crazy, but I don't think we're in a place where it's going to completely replace anyone in our industry, but it's definitely going to affect people's jobs. So if you're looking at doing anything sort of in the visual effects space or something like that, it is definitely impacting it heavily. I don't think we'll have to worry about AI writers anytime soon, I hope, but you never know. And then my path to being a literary assistant. So when I graduated, from UBC, I took some time off because I had no idea that a global pandemic was going to hit like 7 months later and screw everything up. So I took some time off, and then I said, okay, what do I want to do? I don't know what I want to do. And film jobs, you can't just go on LinkedIn and get a film job. You can sometimes, especially for the big studios, but it's not like your typical job where you can just go on LinkedIn and get something. So I had to ask around to some of my friends who did the film production degree instead of film studies degree and say, gee, have you heard of anything happening? And one of my friends said that she had interned a long time ago when she was in high school at this very small little boutique literary agency in Canada. And she was like, I can reach out and see if they're taking interns again. And at the time, I was working as a bartender that I did all throughout university. So I had some income, I had a job, even though obviously it wasn't my career. So I said, sure, I could do an internship if they're available. The thing is, unpaid internships technically aren't legal in Canada or the UK. Obviously in the US, they are in some states still legal, but it doesn't matter. Like, you were going to get asked to do unpaid work at the beginning of your career. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish it was different, but it is sort of the reality. And so, like many people, I took an unpaid internship at this company. And so at the literary agency, I don't think the big agencies in LA, I'm pretty sure they don't do free internships anymore. Like, they'll do like a paid internship program. Obviously you're not going to be making buckets of money, especially for the hours that you work. But I think now it's, they're too big, and the world has changed. They can't do the unpaid stuff anymore. But I took an unpaid internship. I'm not going to tell you not to do that if somebody offers it to you. I mean, if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't be where I am now. But use your judgment, I think, and decide if it's something that you want to do. Not everyone has the opportunity to be able to take an unpaid internship and still be able to like pay their rent and pay their bills. I was lucky that I could. So I took this internship. I said, look, I just want to learn. What do you have going on? I emailed them. They said, come in. I went in, I talked to them. They saw that I had done a degree in film studies, that I had done script coverage before, which is a huge part of the job that I can't believe I omitted. And I'll go into it in just a second. That I'd done coverage before, and that was part of my degree. And they were like, great, this is what we need. So script coverage is in development. One of the main things that you do, like, actually, I cannot believe that I omitted this. And basically, when I read a book or I read a script, remember how I mentioned before that I would tell Alfonso, oh, I think maybe it's not worth for you to look at. If it is worth him looking at, I will take the script and I will write a coverage report. So I will put the log line in, I will put a mini summary in, I will outline the characters, I will give over an all impression if I think it's good or not, and then I will write a summary of whether it's the book or the script or whatever. I'll write a summary. I'll keep it to like 2 pages. So it can be quite challenging to condense the whole story into 2 pages. Sometimes I'll do longer if the book is long. And then I write my comments about why I think this is good or why I think it's bad. And if it's not working, I'll say why, because A, it's not well written. And even if it was better written, it still doesn't work because it would be too expensive, or it's a period piece, which nobody wants to do right now, or something like that, right? I'll outline my specific reasons at my company for saying no. So when I did my film studies degree, we wrote essay after essay after essay after essay about films and film theory. And it very much kind of falls into the script coverage world. Film studies really teaches you how to dissect and critique a film the way that a literature degree does for books. And that's why those skills are transferable into development. And so that's what I learned when I studied film. And that's what I brought to the table when I did my internship. I said, I did film studies, so I can do script coverage. I can do that in my sleep. And that was great for them because literary agencies get mountains of rating. And a dirty little secret is almost none of the agents do any of the reading at all. When you get to the point of being an agent, you will not be doing your own reading. You won't read your client's stuff. I mean, if you're a good agent, you will, but a lot of them don't. They hand it off to the assistant or they hand it off to the intern. The intern will write coverage, and then that's what they read. And that's what they make their decision off of, because they don't have time to read all these books and all these scripts, right? So anyways, long story short, when I sat down and I interviewed for that internship, that was something they were really keen on because they needed me to do coverage. So they hired me off the bat, and then I kind of worked my way up in the company internally. I got really lucky. It was like a perfect storm of bad and good events, because a few months after I started my internship, the pandemic hit, and the girl who was the office admin of this company, but also kind of like the assistant to the rest of the agents, because it wasn't that big of a company, not everyone had their own assistant, she quit and she had to move back home because she was like, I'm not going to be here during the pandemic. So then I kind of like inherited that position, not necessarily because I was ready for it, but because I was there and I knew everybody. And so I kind of like, it was trial by fire, and I learned everything that way. And then as the world started opening back up again and the industry started back up again, because there's a long time when nothing was happening, right? Then my boss, who was the head literary agency at this company, or the head of the company, his assistant had quit, and he said, do you want to do it? And I was terrified because I knew how hard of a job it was and how intense it was, but I was like, you know what? Yeah, let me do it. Let's do it. And I learned so much, and I'm so glad that I did it. And I got to a point where I realized, you know, it was different. It wasn't CAA or WME where they tell you to leave after 2 years. He wasn't going to tell me to leave. I had to tell myself to leave. And I'm glad that I did. But yeah, that was my very long answer to your question.
I know you mentioned this before,
yeah,
but I was just wondering, like living in a city like London, I know it's quite expensive to live there. I'm wondering, because I know that's a concern of a lot of parents and stuff, how well does the industry pay?
Yes. Yeah. Well, oh my gosh, relatable. Yeah. Obviously, like I said, I started off taking an unpaid internship. Not ideal. Most parents would be like, oh my God. As an assistant, if you're working in LA, just in general in the US, salaries are high. So, and the assistants at these agencies in Los Angeles get paid very well, because it's a very difficult job, and they know that it's expensive to live in that city and they need to keep it running. So you get paid very well, like enough for you to have your apartment with your roommate, pay your bills, save money, the whole shebang, even in a city as expensive as Los Angeles. London in general, and this isn't just for my industry, just in general, salaries are lower in the UK. Cost of living in certain ways, like everyday groceries and stuff like that, are lower than in the US. So that's why the salaries are lower, just how it is. But when I first moved here, I got a job as a development coordinator at a company, very small production company, before I started working for Alfonso. Development coordinator is like the step down before development executive, kind of doing the same job, but just getting paid less. And I got paid not well at all. I'm talking like really, really, really bad money, but I still could pay my bills. I could still do everything. If your parents are worried about you like making, like if they want you to make like 100K a year, like that's not going to happen at the beginning of your career. Like, but you can survive. You can survive. Everybody can survive. But this is my biggest thing I've had a discussion with my close friend who works as a producer in LA. Out of all the people we graduated film school with, there's maybe a handful of us who are actually still working in the industry, because you do have to like put your all in there. You know, you have to just go for it, and you might be hustling and you might be eating ramen noodles for, you know, a few months because you know, you're not making 100K a year, but it works out. And now I work this fantastic job and I make plenty of money and I'm completely fine. It's just that initial first maybe year or two when you're first starting off and you're just kind of hustling around, you know, you're not going to be making buckets of money. But you know, if your parents want you to do a traditional sort of career path where your first job in your industry is like well established, you make a lot of money, that is likely not going to happen here, but you won't be like living on the streets, you know? So yeah, even with the cost of living in London, I'm still okay. And even when I first moved here and my job was really bad, the salary, I was still okay. Like you can make it work. You can make anything work. But sadly, I couldn't say anything to your parents if they wanted assurance that you were going to be making buckets of money right away. I wish. But sadly, Sadly, we're all not that lucky, but you will be okay if you decide to do it. LA, London, New York, cities of artists, and they all make it, and they all survive. So yeah.
Okay, I think that's a good place to stop and end things before we get too depressed about the realities of being an adult and paying your own bills.
No, and I'm sorry, I didn't want to depress you guys at all. It's just like the reality of it. But at the end of the day, like I said, these are cities of artists. We're all happy. We're all having a great time. We're all making it. And in all that time that I was struggling, I was literally having the time of my life. I was never like, oh my God, I'm depressed. It was a great time. So do not let that discourage you at all. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be a Debbie Downer.
No. I think it's important. And it's good to, that's why we call this series Get Real, because it's about the realities and sometimes leaving that bubble of high school, especially as third culture kids, are not always prepared for life on the outside of the international school bubble. So it's so important to hear from alumni like yourself that have gone out and had different sorts of experiences and able to come back and share it with the students. So Marley, thank you so much. I know it was very, very, very early in the morning for you to start this call there in London. So we really, really appreciate it. And thank you to Mr. Nichols for giving us his class time today. And of course to the students for listening and for your insightful questions. And that's been this episode of Get Real. Thank you all so much for participating.